We just got about a minute before noon. Are we ready to get going?
Yep.
I'm ready.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. I want to thank you for joining our Zoom meeting today. I'm Stacy Bynes, the Director of Membership and Marketing for the Five Star Accredited Fort Bend Chamber of Commerce. Again, I really appreciate you spending your time with us today. So let's get started by introducing our speaker. Glenn Smith has been coaching business and organizational leaders both nationally and internationally for decades. He has taught graduate level courses on leadership and organizational development, and he created the Business Acceleration Process, which is a unique and proven process to help business owners grow their businesses while balancing their lives. To list Glenn's accolades, accomplishments, and credentials would take a lot more time than I have for this session. So let's get to the reason why you joined us today. Glenn, thank you very much for being here.
Well, thank you, Stacy. It's great to be here with everybody. Thank you all for attending today. It looks like we've got a great group of participants on today, so I'd love to see you. If you turn on your video, we have people muted, and I want you to know that we will do some Q&A in this session, and you can talk. Even though you're muted, you can unmute and talk and then mute yourself back, or there's a shortcut that works for most computers, and that is if you're muted, you can press your space bar and you'll notice that you will unmute, and then you can talk, and then when you let go of the space bar, it mutes you back. So it's a great little tool that's available through Zoom. So one of the big things we're going to talk about here is just give you an update on the Paycheck Protection Program. And the Small Business Administration sent out their interim final rule Thursday evening. And so banks were able to start making loans on Friday, and they have been just going crazy making loans for folks. So this is a great time to know that you have a friendship and a relationship with your banker, because the banks are so inundated right now that if you don't know your banker very well, it may take you a while to get through. This is a first come, first serve program. So eventually the money will run out. So if you haven't applied for your Paycheck Protection Program loan, do it as soon as possible. And if you know your banker, which I always encourage my clients to build a friendship, build a relationship with your banker, so that when a time like this comes and you need somebody that you can call and talk to not face to face, maybe face to face on Zoom or FaceTime, but somebody you can talk to, this is the time. And so I had one client this morning tell me that he had never gone into the branch where he banks, his bank. He did all of his banking online. He did not know anybody there. And so he's trying to figure out how to apply for the Paycheck Protection Program loan. And his bank told him, well, you just have to do it online. And he went online and found out that his bank is so inundated that they have temporarily stopped taking applications. So again, I sure wish he had a relationship with his banker, because he could talk to them. He'd have a person to go to. So anyway, the big news is the loan's available. The banks are rolling it out. It's happening fast. People are asking questions like, how much can I borrow? And the final rule gave some good examples, and you can download a copy of this yourself if you like. You can just go to the Paycheck Protection Program interim final rule, and it's right there on the internet. You can read it for yourself. It's 31 pages, so unless you're just bored, you may just want to take some notes here and not bother with reading it. But the question is, how much can I borrow? And the way they determine that is you aggregate your payroll costs over the past 12 months and then divide that by 12. That's basically, that gives you your average monthly amount. And then you multiply that times 2.5, and then that's the amount you can borrow. Now, there are a few caveats in that if you have employees who make more than $100,000 a year, then anything in excess over $100,000 is not allowable for this loan. So if you have employees that are over 100,000, you have to take that excess off and max them out at 100,000. So you can figure that out. It's not that difficult. Another question that's come up is what kind of payroll documentation is needed? And the Small Business Administration has actually left that somewhat to the discretion of the banks. They recommend things like your 941s, if you file that, any kind of payroll documentation like that is useful. If you're a sole proprietor, sole proprietors can apply for this as well. And the SBA even said just an income and expense statement, just showing, you know, what your owner profit or your sole proprietor earnings are after expenses. That's adequate too. But again, it may vary by the bank. Some banks want certain documents that they feel comfortable with. Others are a little bit more lenient. So talk to your banker, find out what they want. But according to the interim rule, it's actually pretty simple. So you can get that together pretty quickly. What qualifies as payroll cost? Some people asked last week, you know, what about commissions? Do commissions qualify? And they do. Salary, wages, commissions, any kind of similar compensation, even tips in the restaurant industry or hospitality. You know, if you have some documentation to show tips, like a tip pool or, you know, any kind of tip documentation, that counts as well. Payment for group health insurance, that's included in that. The only thing that I heard questions about this past week that that wasn't clear, but it's very, very clear now in this ruling is, what about independent contractors? You have not just employees, but you have independent contractors. Can you include them? And the answer to that is no, because the independent contractors can actually file for their own as sole proprietors or self-employed people. So you cannot include your independent contractors, your 1099 workers, in your payroll costs. You can include just almost everything except for federal withholding. You can include your federal withholding as part of your payroll costs. The interest rate, what is the government going to charge for this? Well, it's unbelievable. It's 1%. It's a 1% interest rate, and the loan can be carried out for 2 years. It matures in 2 years. Payments are deferred for 6 months, but interest does accumulate. But of course, at 1%, that's not a lot of interest. Now, the other thing that's very important here about the Paycheck Protection Program is that this is a forgivable loan, and the intent is that you as a business owner will take this money, get your people back on payroll so that they're getting paid. The government wants that because they would rather you be paying your people than unemployment paying your people. So they want you to use this, get your people back on payroll, and use this, you know, to keep them engaged. And some people will ask, well, you know, like in a retail store, we can't open for business. How do I keep my people engaged? I'm going to give you some suggestions on that before we wrap up today. But that's the purpose of it. The maturity is 2 years. Payments are deferred for 6 months. And here's what's exciting about this to me. You can apply for forgiveness within that 6-month period. And theoretically, it hasn't been done yet, but theoretically, you can get forgiveness and never have to pay anything. They will forgive not only the principal, but also the interest. And so all of that is outlined here in the interim final rule. And so those are some highlights. One last thing I want to say about it is that you can use up to 25% of this for rent, for interest on a mortgage that your company has. You can use it for utilities. And so up to 25% of this can actually be used for some of those specific things. And you just need to have that documentation. So when you go to ask for forgiveness, you can show them, here's what I paid. Maybe it's 100% toward payroll cost. Maybe it's 75% toward payroll costs and 25% toward rent and utilities. But just show that documentation. And the SBA is going to be bringing out some further information about how that process will work. They don't have the details on that yet. So I'm going to pause here. If you have questions, you can put them in the chat. Just put your questions in the chat, and I'd love to see what thoughts you have, what questions you have. I'd like to interact with you over that. If you'd like to unmute yourself and ask a question, feel free to. I'm going to open it up right now and let you do that if you like. It's great to see everybody on here. So many friends. Good to see you all.
Hey, Glenn, it's King. How are you?
Good, King. Glad you're on with us today.
Thank you. It's good to see you guys. One question I have is there's both, obviously, the PPP as well as the EIDL, right? Or the, what is it, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. I think that's what that stands for.
Yes.
What would you use? I applied for both. So I applied for that last week in advance because the PPP hadn't been out. What would you apply those funds for versus the PPP? Because there seems to be a little bit of overlap and at least some confusion even in the PPP application because it talks about that. I'll leave that there.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. You can use the Economic Injury Disaster Loan for anything operationally, anything you need for your business to get you through this hard time. Now, if you use it for payroll costs, you cannot, use your PPP for those same costs. However, if you do use it for payroll costs, you can actually add that to the amount you want in your PPP and get it forgiven. So that's kind of a cool thing that the final rule here pointed out. So you can use the EIDL, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, for whatever you need it for in your business. And the term on that is, I think that goes out to 10 years, I believe it is. And the interest rates vary up to 4% on that. But again, that's something you go directly online and fill out the form. You work directly with the SBA on that. You don't work through the banker on that one. You can, but you don't have to. The PPP, you have to go through your banker because they want the banks sending out that money to get people back on payroll as quickly as possible. King, does that answer your question, or was there something else?
Yeah,
there?
Yeah, it does. I guess I'd be interested in, I don't know, feedback in terms of what other types of things are there besides payroll and rent. I mean, I guess inventory. I look at my reserves. My reserves are depleting, obviously, pretty quickly. Is that something that I could, apply the EIDL for? Because I do have, suppliers. There's trying to figure out where, because the way that I see this, Glenn, is that I would in essence have two basic accounts. Should I get the EIDL as well? I create a separate checking account for the PPP so that I can actually track what's going to my payroll, but then maybe another one for the EIDL, should I get it, right? And I don't know how that all kind of works. And then apply that to, in the interim reserves if I should need it. And then if I don't need it, I can pay it all back. But
yeah,
I guess I'm a little bit, I'd be interested in other people's perspectives in terms of where they might use that.
Well, let me just say the way you're thinking is what I understand the purpose of it is. You can use that EIDL for whatever you need operationally to keep your business afloat and keep you going. That will have to be paid back unless you're using it for payroll purposes, at which point it can be rolled into your PPP and be forgiven. Great question.
Yeah, thank you, Glenn.
Sure, great question. Some people, any other questions, feel free to add them in the chat or just unmute yourself and stop me. Some people have asked the question, particularly folks from retail or other businesses where, they can't really open for business because they can't let people come in or come to their place. What do I do if I've got my employees on payroll, but they really can't work? And that's a great question. And I want to give you 4 or 5 suggestions here of what you can do to keep your team, your employees engaged, and utilize this, this great benefit the SBA is providing. Number 1, this is a great time for training. You can do some training with your folks. You can, you know, there's online training programs. You can do some sales training with your people. You can do some customer service training with your people. It's a great time if you want to just do some training on interpersonal relationships. It'd be a great time to have everybody reading the book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and discussing it. You're going to have to meet remotely, obviously, use Zoom or FaceTime or one of the other tools that's available to us. But this is a great time to keep them employed, keep them engaged, and do training. You may also have certain projects that they can work on right now. If you're an essential business, you can come together. If you're not an essential business, then you're going to have to do it again remotely. But there's so many great collaboration tools like Google Docs and SharePoint that you can work on things together. Another thing you can do with your people right now is you can work on process improvement. I hear business owners tell me all the time, you know, I really need to document my processes, but I don't have time. Well, guess what? You got time now. Get those things documented. You know, get your procedures and policies, get your team creating those. This is a great time to create that operations manual that you've been talking about for the last 5 years, but haven't been able to get around to. So, you know, get your people involved with that and create your process documentation and talk about ways to improve processes. Again, great time for team building, just building relationships within your team. Customer relationship building is a great thing you can be doing right now. Maybe, you know, maybe not all your employees are customer facing, but probably a lot of them are. And this is a good time to do some customer service training, but also some customer service outreach, just reaching out, calling them, you know, making contact with your customers and letting them know that, you know, you're here and you're available for them. And you're not trying to sell anything right now. You're just wanting to let your customers know that you're still here. You know, you're thinking about them, and we're all going to get through this time and be better at the end. This is also
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead. Who's that?
Oh, sorry, that was Farah. I actually had a question. I can ask it when you pause for questions. I apologize.
Okay, no, that's okay. Go ahead, Farah. I'll stop here and let you ask.
I was just looking that, so for certain businesses, we, like, for example, we bank with Wells Fargo, and they've stopped taking applications for the Paycheck Protection Program. Do you know about that, and what is your recommendation for that?
Yeah, that my client I spoke with this morning, that they were a Wells customer too, and Wells has stopped temporarily taking applications. I think some other banks have stopped too, and again, if you know a banker, if you have a relationship with a local banker, just contact them directly and talk to them. If you don't, you're just kind of at the mercy of what they make available on the internet. So with the situation with Wells in particular, I'd recommend you just recheck their site every morning, every afternoon, because I believe eventually they're going to open it back up. They were just like all banks right now. They were just so inundated, they had to shut it down for a period of time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Farah. Great question.
Hey, Glenn, this is Christy Spencer. I just want to let you know that BBVA did the same thing, but my notes said they were going to process all the applications they had in first, and then they would open it up, because I guess on BBVA, we were uploading the information they needed, and they just wanted a certain amount, and then they were going to process those and open it back up. So maybe Wells Fargo is the same way. I don't know.
Yeah, I understand Wells is going to open it back up as well once they get caught up.
Hey, Glenn, there's a couple of questions in the group chat. Would you like me to read those, or?
I'm looking at those right now. Let me, thanks, Ryan, for pointing those out. Darcy was telling us that her bank's requiring specific names and payroll data for each employee. Again, it varies from bank to bank. Some banks want more specific detail, others are not. The SBA ruling leaves it to the bank as to what they want. The bank cannot make it too onerous. The ruling does talk about that because they want this expedited quickly. You know, how does that work since you won't be paying those terminated people? The way the ruling reads is you take an average of your last 12 months, and that's the amount that, according to the ruling, is allowed, plus any EIDL that you want to add into that you've already started using for payroll. If your bank says, well, we'll give it to you based on what you've got now, then you'll just have to work with your bank. Like I say, some banks kind of handle it differently. The ruling is really kind of interesting. I was pretty fascinated by it. They are giving banks a lot more freedom and authority to make some of these decisions than I've ever seen before. At least I've seen in the last 12 years. So that's kind of interesting.
Glenn?
Yes.
This is Darcy, and I just wanted to put that question to you. I've also put it to my bank, and they are checking with their people, whoever those people are, because I too had read the information, and it was going to be really simple. I had filled out the form and everything, but this was their process. So in Comerica, our main bank is not processing these things at all. They're simply referring everybody to the SBA. So, and they didn't say anything about shutting down applications. They said, you know, we've been told that we're just going to have everybody apply directly online. I couldn't find that anywhere when I went searching for it.
Yeah, the application is online, but there's no place to apply directly online. So
exactly.
I don't know what they're saying. The intent is that you go through the bank so the bank can get the money to you right away.
Right. And then my second question was, we have a couple folks, we've gone back to work. We have a construction component, and so we have a couple folks who are just saying we just aren't comfortable with that. So my question then becomes, do we need to keep them on the payroll despite the fact that they are not coming in? Or do we lay them off per my conversation with TWC? Now, that was before the PPP program was implemented. But my original conversation with TWC was those folks had to be formally laid off so that they could then apply for unemployment. And then when this is over, you really should hire them back. The issue is we've got most of our people who are fine coming back. Do I still continue to pay the ones who won't be contributing, even though everybody else is? It's a real moral dilemma for me.
Yeah, that's a great question. You've got a couple of things here to consider. One is, you know, do they qualify for the emergency paid sick leave or the emergency FMLA? If they do, then you've got that route you can go. If they don't, then you can furlough them. That's the term that's typically used when the hope or intent is to hire them back. You're not obligated to hire them back, but you can furlough them, and then they're eligible for full unemployment. And right now, for folks who are, as I understand it, as part of the CARES Act, if they get unemployment, they get not just 60%, but 100%.
Okay. So as far as the emergency FMLA or sick leave, where would I find the information for that?
Just do a Google search for emergency
Okay.
paid sick leave or an emergency FMLA, and you'll get the data you need on that.
Okay.
If you've got
All
an
right. That
HR
sounds good.
if you got an HR representative or you have a payroll service that provides that, they'll give you that information as well.
Hey, Glenn, let
Okay.
me jump in real quick and let you know that we are at 12:25, and originally our session was going to be for 30 minutes, but if everyone would like to remain, we can keep this session going. I just wanted to acknowledge that originally we had said this was a 30-minute session, but we are here for you. If you want to keep going, we certainly will.
I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll keep going. If you have to drop off because of your schedule, I understand, no problem. We'll keep going for a little bit longer because we've got a few more questions in the chat. And I had a couple other things before we wrapped up. So we'll keep going. But again, if y'all have to drop off, we're going to stay on probably for another 10 or 15 minutes, it looks like, maybe. Thanks, Stacy, for that. One question that came up was just to confirm the 2.5 factor is multiply for the monthly payroll or annual payroll. It's monthly payroll. It's 2.5 times your average monthly payroll over the last 12 months. So the idea is that in 2 months, we're going to be through this. That's the idea behind that. Got your question here, Darcy. Thanks for bringing that up. Good. Any other questions? Feel free to bring them up right now or put them in the chat. So let me just say this, and I'll just wrap up my time with this, and if any other questions come in, we'll answer them. The Paycheck Protection Program is designed for us to keep our people employed. They want us to keep our people on the payroll. It's also available to you if you're a sole proprietor or an independent contractor. You will have to talk to your bank about what payroll documentation they want on that. What was mentioned in the final rule was 1099s or even an income and expense statement could be used. But again, the bank will have to tell you what they want because the banks have some discretion on that. So the idea is keep people, employed, keep them on the payroll. But you may be limited because of the stay-at-home order right now. So again, use this time to train your people, do team development, team building. Use this time to improve your processes, document your processes. Use this time to reach out to your customers and your clients just to stay in touch and keep the relationship warm. One thing that I didn't mention earlier is this is a great time to experiment with some things, particularly right now while we're working remotely. It's a great time to experiment with some team communication, team development, things, using the tools that are available through Zoom or FaceTime or Skype or any of the other apps that are available. Experiment with some things. Experiment with some online team building. This is a great time to, a lot of the training programs that are online that you typically pay for, some of them are being offered right now for free. So as a part of this crisis time, they want you to engage with them. And then one last thing I want to add here is this is a great time for us as businesses to offer a complimentary or free service to our customers. This is a good time to talk to them and say, hey, because of this time, over this next month, I want to make this available to you, my customer or my client. And normally we would charge for this. And once we're through this, of course, we'll get back to charging for this. But right now, we want to provide this. And the reason you can do that is because you've got the Paycheck Protection Program helping you keep your people paid. So that's going to cover the lost income. And use this time to just serve your customers better. Find ways to deliver added value to them. And so one of the things that I'm offering to my clients right now, and even I'll offer this to any of you who would like this, planning, coaching right now during this month, since we're all pretty much limited at what we can do. I'm happy to offer a session or two to help you get this plan together. Maybe you need to put a training plan together for your staff. I'm happy to help you with that. Maybe you need to do a team building thing. I'm happy to help you with that. Maybe you need to document your processes. I'm happy to help you with that. So during this stay home month, when we're all pretty much limited, I make that available to any of you who'd like. Just email me. I'll put my email address in the comments here. So you feel free to email me and I'll follow up with you.
Thank you for that, Glenn.
I just did that privately. Let me give it to everyone. All right. Any other questions? Stacy, thank you for hosting us today, and I'll turn it back over to you to wrap up.
Okay, well, Glenn, we really appreciate your insight, the information you provided for everyone today, and I just have a few other things that I want to make everyone aware of. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Here are a few events and resources that are available to you. Tomorrow at noon, we will have another Zoom meeting where we will present best practices for working remote. Charles Swihart from Preactive IT Solutions and Christina Hawkins from Global Specs Incorporated will discuss best practices for adjusting to working remotely. From keeping your network and data secure to using the most effective tools to collaborate and more. You can RSVP for that online. And then on Thursday, our social media expert, Tristan Sutton, will be our guest for moving forward Facebook marketing for your business. And in this session, Tristan will guide and offer expertise in using Facebook ads to reach your target market, getting more engagement from your followers, and getting started with virtual events. So for more information or to register for those free presentations, you can go to fortbendchamber.com and click the events tab in the upper right-hand corner to view our calendar. And while you're on the website, you can sign up to receive our weekly newsletter if you haven't already. And you can view the playback of this as well as other online presentations. And then lastly, follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram to stay up to date on important information and other upcoming sessions and resources. So again, I really appreciate you very much for sharing your time with us today. And we look forward to having you again, hopefully tomorrow and later this week. Have a very good day.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Glenn.
Thank you, Glenn.
Appreciate it.
Thank you all.